Okay. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the E-Trade for Women Leadership Talk. It's an intimate live conversation with an achiever who is transforming the economy and is actually making a positive impact. And I'm Sonia. My name is Sonia, and I will be your host for today. And we're going to start with a little housekeeping. As mentioned, this is a conversation, so there will be some interactions and there will be some time for you to be able to interact with Catherine and ask all your questions. And feel free also to raise your hand and to react, comment, or ask your question in the chat throughout the whole session. And as always, it's a good opportunity as well to network. So feel free to put your contacts, your LinkedIn details for other women to know more about you, your email, your website, in order to connect with other women like you who are in the session. And today, I would like to introduce Catherine Wolf. Catherine is the founder of Odetta, Odetta.ae, an on-demand outsourcing platform that enables companies to delegate data workflows more easily. And after a successful career in banking, Catherine started Odetta with the willingness to not only answer a need in her country, in the USA, but also to make an impact and to empower women across the world in other regions of the world. And she's going to tell us a bit more about that after. And from the name of her company to the decisions to bootstrap, Catherine has made unusual choices with what we are used to today. But she's actually doing it successfully. And today she's here to tell us how she's working to make the world a better place. And we are going to learn more about Odetta, about Catherine's amazing story, and how every day she's making a difference in the world. Catherine, so welcome. Thanks a lot for giving us some of your time. It's a real pleasure having you today. And let me just start with maybe a basic questions to know a bit more about you. You started Odetta 4 years ago, and this company has been growing since then. But can you tell us how you started, how this idea of starting Odetta come to you? How did that happen?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Feel free to make it interactive. I'll try to also just tell you the truth of things that have happened, similar to kind of like what maybe I might have wanted to know as I was starting it out. We all have our own journey, but I'll share mine. So I actually got the idea for Odetta about 5 years ago, so a year before I started the company. And like many of you who have businesses and or have started or are like seeking different ideas, I was really on the hunt for an idea for a while. I had started something, when I was 25, 26, that was, that really kind of like gave me the sense of, wow, it's pretty incredible to be able to have an idea and build it. And so but that said, it was pretty hard to come up with an idea that I felt was a really amazing kind of solution to a problem that I wanted to help solve, but also could be kind of a big company and one that I felt connected to. And so those were probably my criteria. And I would say I was specifically on the hunt for a female economy kind of like concept. And what I mean by that is I wanted to build a product or a service that didn't exist because of some sort of bias around gender. And that was, that's kind of a large scope, but I knew that there were a lot of potential ideas and companies that hadn't been built because people hadn't built them yet. And so how I got the idea was, I would say my background had been in banking. And so I'd been very focused on financial service products. And it really took, kind of having a lot of conversations with people, but specifically with one person who kind of like took me from the space that I knew and felt comfortable with to another world, which is the gig economy. And so I'm so grateful that kind of like that shift of perspective from a place that I understood to kind of like this new world. And really what happened was, he worked at a company called Upwork, which was one of the largest freelancing platforms. And he shared with me that that might be an interesting take on kind of female economy and gig economy. And I did a little research and learned that 75% of the women getting highly educated all across Middle East and South Asia were not participating in the kind of like labor market, the traditional formal labor market, or the freelancing platforms, and that in the Middle East, at least, that Upwork was 92% male. And so it was those kind of two stats that led me to kind of do a little bit more research and start the company.
Okay, that's actually interesting how you got in touch with the gig economy that you mentioned, because obviously it's a very big deal, but sometimes we don't really see what's happening behind the scene. We just see how it's convenient for us, and you managed to make that connection between something that is actually very useful to startups in the USA, and at the same time that is helping women entrepreneurs. And then now you saw what happened, you had this idea. So how did you actually put it into practice? How did you start concretely to manage to make Odetta come to life and happen?
Yeah, so I didn't really know. I had this general concept that what if we redesigned freelancing? So it was designed around women that were not participating in the labor market, but maybe wanted to. And so it was kind of from that design center was, I didn't know, but I needed to speak to these women and ask them what they wanted. And so I posted and all of these things are just kind of like, you just have to like take one incremental step forward. It doesn't have to be, anything fancy. I posted on a friend of mine's Facebook page, and she grew up in Pakistan, and I had met her and kind of shared what I was working on. And so it was a simple post on our page. Do you want to work from home? Highly, ambitious women across Middle East and South Asia. And we got, I think within 24 hours, we got 300 women apply to this link. And that's not really wild when you look at some of the stats around job postings, especially in places like Saudi Arabia, et cetera, where like these jobs don't exist, the ones that are kind of designed around caretakers, flexible work, remote work at home. Obviously that's shifted with the pandemic. But the point is we needed some users. And so the best way I found to find users was just to post something in the universe on one of the social media pages. And that worked. And then I took a trip to Pakistan to interview hundreds of women. This was kind of while I was still working my last job. And, I had a number of conversations, and those conversations led me to believe that I wasn't sure what Odetta was specifically, but I knew that there was a large group of women who wanted to be connected to the world, especially to Silicon Valley and technology, that didn't have access and weren't necessarily being hired by these traditional companies online. And and then I ended up quitting my job, but not until I had saved enough money to have a runway, which is important, I think, because then you kind of can maintain a little bit of power. You're not as desperate, but I'll go into that a little bit later. And I moved to the country of Jordan, which is a place where, at least when I moved there, 15% of the women getting educated are working. So that meant that 85% of the women graduating from university are dropping out upon graduation, which is an issue on so many different dimensions. And so I thought that would be a good place to kind of test out the idea. And I was really kind of just interested in being in the place where I was building for, as opposed to being someone who was sitting in my apartment in New York and kind of like coming up with these ideas. It from the beginning has always been very important for me to try to build a company that is empowered, that is trying to kind of like find the voice of the women that we're trying to help, and then have them guide the product and guide the business. But in short, I spent many months in Jordan, and quickly realized that that you could hire and find the talented women through social media. And then I decided to move to where these companies were, and this is pre-pandemic. So I thought it would be important. And this really was true, that a lot of these companies wouldn't meet with me unless I was sitting in their lobby. And all of that has changed now. But I moved to San Francisco because I realized that this business, even though it's a kind of like a two-sided marketplace, that the challenge was actually figuring out the demand side, the clients. And so I think I was like month 9 perhaps when I moved to San Francisco, and we had already had our first project where a friend of mine from college had hired us to do kind of like a data entry sales project. I had posted again on Facebook. And so all of these things kind of happened with just me posting into the universe, like, oh, we have this, like, does anyone want it? Like, kind of, you want to try it? And it wasn't anything that was that complicated. And I think that may get to kind of later questions, but a lot of people don't start, or they don't build, or they don't expand because they're waiting for, or they've heard of some kind of like fancy strategy around sales or marketing or whatever it is. But I've found that the best thing to do at every stage is just to go onto LinkedIn, figure out who knows the answer to what I'm trying to figure out, whether it's sales, whether it's hiring, input their title into LinkedIn, and then just send them a cold. I don't do InMail. I don't like that as much. It doesn't work as well, but I do just like a cold connect. And I think it's like 10% of those people will reply to you. So you have to kind of send, 100 or so for any particular question you have. And that's a big part of my strategy.
Well, okay, that's actually very, very interesting because, and you mentioned that two sides market, and that's always dilemma when you're an entrepreneur, like where do you start from, because you have the offer, you have the demand. So who is the most, who is your real customer? Who is your priority when it comes to getting leads? And the fact that you decided to go to San Francisco to move shows that it's just about network and connecting. So and that's how you started. And I wanted to maybe talk about another very important aspect for your business, and because you are using digital tools, and you are using the digital to actually connect those users and I mean the demand and the offer. So and you told me that you started without a CTO, which is very surprising. And you don't have a technical background. I mean, you don't have, if I'm not wrong, you don't have a degree in coding or in web development. So, and many women, actually, we have this in our communities, many women who are like, yeah, me, I don't have a background in tech, so I won't be able to start a digital business or to start something that is very digital oriented. So how did you manage to get that done, and how did you go about that?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. Like, I think back to not having a CTO, and that was kind of one of the best things that ever happened to us. And I do remember being, kind of embarrassed about building a tech company and not having that background. And I remember being told, that you can't really start unless, like, I had this concept of what would be the ideal team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And they say all these people, and like what you read about is, you need someone who's complementary, with kind of like a tech background, et cetera. First of all, those people are really hard to find, let alone kind of get on the same page with kind of the vision for the business that you have. It's expensive from an equity kind of like, but obviously if you find someone that's great, or you're starting out with them, then maybe that's meant to be. But what I found was that then may set you up for a different type of company that you're building. And I liked to, each step of the way, I didn't really know that I was doing this along the time, but I kind of would question, a lot of these things that I was told about, like how to build a business. And I think many of them are actually pretty misguided because there is like a route to building a business, which is, raise money, get a team that has all the skill sets that you need, raise more money, pay those people, raise more money, pay those people. And the people that are going to be funding it have a very serious expectation around what type of business you build. And so their market expectation also then has you shift the type of company that you're building. And so if you can remove the reliance on any of that, in particular the funders, your life starts to get very easy and simple. And easy and simple is good when you're starting a company. And so these days, I discovered that for $70 a month, you could basically have instead of building it from scratch, you could have a platform. And so there's all of these over-the-shelf tools and integration tools that you can literally go onto Google and learn how they work as if you're setting up like Gmail for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't, I think like the exercise is a little bit more like, okay, like what do I actually need these users to do in terms of a flow and kind of like steps? And what's important for them, or what's a must-have for them right now? And what I quickly learned was, okay, maybe once we hit like 10 million in revenue, there's going to be certain things that we need to build. But if you can kind of delay all of that and still earn revenue with whatever tools that you're using, and maybe 10% of the users will go away because it's not like a fancy solution. What we found was that they didn't go away, and that we could build just enough to be able to deliver our service. And so most businesses, digital, someone's already built the platform that you need, and then you can have kind of 3 or 4 of them. And I think, again, this is where people have an expectation around, oh, if I'm going to show it to investors, it needs to be something that I've built and I need to, but I've kind of found that, they start to think that, wow, that's like pretty scrappy. Mm-hmm. So anytime you're starting to think like, okay, this is what is expected of me when I have these conversations, that's a red flag. And there's often always a way to get around it in a scrappier way. And usually that kind of like mindset leads to a lot of innovations that will help you build a way better company. And so I think to like all of the different ways that we built the business, it was because we couldn't afford, whatever it was that everyone said that we needed. And we weren't willing to sacrifice our mission, our vision, our ownership to do that. And I think a lot of people make that sacrifice very early on before they know what it is. And it's really important not to do that if it's at all possible.
Okay, yeah, and that leads us to this question of, because you mentioned the funding aspect and having external investors, and you made that decision, and you mentioned it already, to just keep it to yourself and bootstrap. So what are the pros and cons? I mean, you said already that you're very happy about that decision you made, not to call for external funding. So did you ever doubt it at some point? Did you ever wonder and thought like maybe you need to look at getting external funding? Or is this something that from the beginning you were like, yeah, I'm not going to get external funders? Why did you make that decision? How did you make it? And how do you feel about it now?
Now I'm really happy. I will say that we haven't taken any funding. I will say that it has been one of those things that like is continually, like I ask that question a lot. It doesn't just go away, because that's kind of potentially the fuel to build a bigger, more impactful business with more people who are helping you. So obviously it's like, it's not like a fundamental, like black and white, but I think for us, at least, we realized, well, first of all, the first 9 months I was flirting with the investors like everyone else. And I was having the conversations and I was doing the this and that. And I didn't like the power dynamics. I was really, really kind of like uncomfortable in a lot of the conversations I was having. And many of these are mission-oriented investors, kind of like also people that I trusted outside of their job. And I just didn't feel like it was, there was something about it that I didn't want to move forward. And that's another thing with Odetta. I feel like maybe since this is my kind of second/third company, I was really listening to those things kind of like within my body, like red alarms, and following those gut checks. And, the investors, they do a really good job of selling what they can do. I mean, I've almost kind of like been involved in like many almost, and then ultimately had a long weekend away and just said like, no. And so, I guess there was a fear for me around what might happen if we did that. And there was also then an intuition that we could build something amazing without it. And I had to then really understand why I'm building Odetta and getting really like clear around that. Because in the beginning, you know, the question was from the investors, like, are you building $100 million business? And I often would say yes. And then it became clear to me that no, that wasn't the number one thing that I was doing. Once I was able to say, okay, this is a $10 million business, and these are just kind of made up numbers. But once you say that's this size or a $1 million business, and it doesn't mean that I'm not ambitious. It just means that that's what I feel comfortable with building. Then there's a lot of other decisions that you make to build that business. And you don't need to think about a lot of the things that you need to do if you're building the next Dropbox or Google. I didn't want to build the next Dropbox or Google. I wanted to build a business that was sizable, but I wasn't, you know, thinking about kind of like the next level of technology or AI or, and I think sometimes like maybe if you are like, if you want to build something that is going to like transform the way that all humans work, you know, then you do want these investors. But if you're going to do something that you know has a lot of value that can help hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe even millions, like there are enough companies now that have proved that you can do that without capital. It just takes longer. And so for me, I was very clear on the vision. I was able to then like downscale my ambition and my speed and say, I'm going to build this over a much longer period of time and have control and ownership around what's going to happen to kind of like the people on our platform and make sure that it's a good company. You know, I had pretty negative experiences with investors in the past who had been very interventionist. And many of my friends have started companies, and it is glorious for the first 3 or 4 years. You know, you will look at all of their postings about how much they've raised, et cetera. And if you take a look at those companies after like 5 or 6 years, there's a very different story. And so I think that that is not talked about enough. If you just reached out to a bunch of founders who you can see if they've whether had an exit or not and kind of ask them, which I did, almost all of them, second time founders said that they would not raise capital. And so that was enough for me to say, okay, it's not about building a lifestyle business. It's about making decisions around what type of company you want to build at what pace. And then if you do that, and if you do it successfully by being very focused on customer funding and getting kind of good traction, good revenue, then at any point, if we wanted to raise capital right now, we could, but it would be from a position of strength where we would be able to dictate our terms. And that was really important to me. I think just like in general, Odetta is about empowerment. It was about not engaging with people when the tables are biased, where people are taking advantage of your need to grow or whatever it is, early stage of the business. Like there's just so many things that made us want to be independent.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting, and your point of view needs to be heard more and more, because like you said, what we see only is people talking about how much they raise but we don't see what happens behind the scene. So you coming with this story brings a different perspective and a very interesting one, because you don't lose ownership of your business, of your mission, of your objectives. And you manage to prioritize your values and the impact over anything else, and that's very valuable. I just maybe on a lighter note, I think the name of your company is actually related to those values you are prioritizing. So can you tell us a bit more about Odetta? Where did the idea come from, and why did you pick this name?
Yeah, it's funny. I love our name. I didn't expect it to be our name for forever. I was working on, it was a different idea, kind of like in the year leading up to starting the company, maybe 2 years leading up to the company. I was kind of just, it was a totally different idea. And I was listening to Odetta Holmes, the kind of jazz musician, civil rights activist. And I it was a Friday night, 9 p.m. I was working on the idea, and I needed to name the Google Drive that we were putting all of our documents into. And so I just called it Odetta. And then as we kind of realized that we were going to have this kind of like deep connection to Middle East, to South Asia, it was, well, let's have the freelancers, the women that were serving, name the company. And so we went through all of those brainstorms and we came up with really great names. And then we voted, and Odetta still won. And so I think yeah, so you probably can't ever like figure that out, but there's a very strong, powerful voice behind the woman who is singing this. And a lot of her lyrics really speak to kind of a lot of the things that we believe in. And so that was the source of the name.
It's very interesting, very original. And I read a bit about Odetta's story thanks to you. And and I really think it fits the company and your objectives. It's a really beautiful, interesting name. So well done. And how do you manage to work with people, with women from so many different countries with different culture in a world that is more and more globalized? How do you manage to bring all of them together and work together in a good environment?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of answers to that. I think that one needs to be able to do that in the current operating world. And so, we were doing this pre-pandemic, but I think even like, kind of especially so post-pandemic, most teams are global. They are bringing together talent and clients kind of from all over the world. So the technology exists to be able to work asynchronously in any time zone. And it's all over the shelf. I mean, every company is using Slack and Zoom and Airtable and, kind of like all of those different tools to build community. We've got a couple of different roles within our digital community that have been helpful to bring together especially our freelancers, because we build a lot of tools for them. We have quite a few virtual assistants who kind of like are the glue, kind of facilitating a lot of the kind of like the meeting setting and like the communication and the coordination, which is all asynchronous and text-based. And then I think probably for us, the mission is really our glue, because we have people from so many different cultures. We have people working together who are from countries that do not get along. We have, and part of it is just, I think it might even be within the culture of Odetta that we don't believe that they don't get along, that we get along. We're all human, and we try not to bring kind of like the messaging from the outside world into our platform, and maybe have a naivete around like what those actually mean. And so kind of like forcing kind of like this apolitical organization that like then maybe we can prove that women working globally together can solve some of the challenges that haven't been solved. And so yeah, but I think the biggest thing is especially if you're building a company that we have hundreds of people all over who've never met each other, there has to be something that or a reason why they come together. And for us, it's really around the mission. And I think that without that, there might be a lot of confusion around why we exist, why it's really important for us to build a community centered around love, why kind of listening is really important. So there's all these like traits that are part of our culture that if they didn't derive from something, it would just be kind of the case of some CEO having these like ideas and then trying to enforce it on a community. And that's not really what's happening. We have kind of like a mission around empowerment. And then from that stem a lot of the things that would kind of lead to that. And so then everyone within the community can bring forth what they believe in as well. And so then we're just a space for all of this to happen, which I think is interesting in a world of kind of digital communities and building, you know, a lot of people who are saying now, oh, we need to go back to the office. You know, we've really proven that you can have, now we're almost 400 people who've never met each other really, working together in what we kind of got named one of the happiest startup companies recently. And so that can happen organically, and that can happen through community.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. How you managed to get that done and to gather all these people around love and around this mission, and your business is actually profitable at the same time. So it proves that you can have a profitable business, a growing business, and still value your mission and have values and communicate that to the community as well. So, and would you mind sharing with us one of the challenges you faced or one of your failures, something you've been through that might not be easy to share with us, but it's always very insightful to learn as well from other people's challenges. Which type of challenge or failure did you have, and how did you actually manage to overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first part is an acceptance of kind of failure and success, and not getting too hung up on either, because they are part of starting a company. And I think if you're too focused on just like all the successes happening over and over again, then like you have like less resilience for the failures. And at least what I've seen is sometimes the failures turn out to be what leads you to the innovation for your greatest success. So if you can kind of have that as a mentality, even though it's hard, but knowing that there's certain parts of your kind of like startup journey that will be like really dark, and then others that will be really light and heavy and, you know, hard. And so for me, I think the first 9 months kind of went swimmingly well. I was surprised. It was like relatively easy. Again, I wasn't up against having to I hadn't raised capital, I hadn't done CTO. I just kind of had recruited a lot of really smart people, and we found some clients. And so, but we got great clients, and we got great people. And so it was going well, and we had a lot of revenue coming in. And I think I moved to San Francisco, and I got an apartment, and it wasn't a super fancy apartment, but I was paying rent for the first time. And prior to that, I'd been not paying rent really. And so right when I moved in, I think we had at the time around 50 Odetans working for the company. We had maybe 10 clients, but one of them our entire team was working for. It was a very large contract. And probably my scariest startup moment was when we got an email from the client saying they finished the work and they'd automated our workflow and it was done. And, you know, that was kind of a precursor to realizing that, you know, that a lot of the work that we do can be automated. And so we have to be the bridge between AI and manual work. But of course, having 50 people rely on us for the revenue that was generating their income and have that go away was pretty scary. And I then calculated that I had a certain number of months that we were like losing money consistently. And then I had a certain number of months that I could afford to stay in my 1-year lease. And so that was kind of scary. But what it led to was I realized that even if we would be delayed and I had to go kind of get another job, move back in with family, you know, kind of like do this as not my number one thing anymore, that I would still build the company. And so then I realized like, wow, there are a lot of options, even though this isn't necessarily like, maybe this won't go as fast as I thought. I'm still going to build this, even if it takes me many, many years. And so that was nice to know that I cared about it that much, which is, I think, really important. It can't just be like, oh, like that would be fun to do. I mean, like, it's like, you're like really into making some sort of reality around what you've decided to do. And then probably the other, like the very great thing that came from that experience of being really stressed around cash and having a lot of people who, you know, were also kind of stretched out financially was we became customer obsessed. And then I kind of like decided at some point I was just going to get other jobs and then do this on the side. But then I was like, you know what, Catherine, like you have to just believe in yourself. Like this is going to work. Like just spend all of your time doing outbound sales. And I had done sales before. So I knew that I could just go onto LinkedIn or write like 100 emails a day that are personalized to people to get them to also believe in what we were doing. And it took a while for that method to work, but it finally did actually. And I think that led us to build this like really amazing kind of sales machine. And then we started selling that as a service. So we could sell it to hundreds of clients because we figured out how to leverage the Odetans to build out B2B sales for tech companies. And then, so, you know, like that ended up being like a really important time for us. Also, probably the biggest thing that happened during that time was, I realized there's no way I'm going to hire anyone based in Silicon Valley. Like they're super expensive, couldn't afford them. And what if we could ask the Odetans to build Odetta? What if every single role we could find a woman who's super talented, maybe they've never done this role before, but across every department, and try to see if we could find it from our pool of Odetans first, which would obviously be great from a cost perspective, but even more so from like the perspective of empowerment, of actually building a business that is, you know, kind of led by the women we're trying to serve. So it's their company, so it's their vision. That was amazing. And I don't know if we would have done that if we had just been like, you know, raised $500,000 right from the get-go and then hired a few of the people we were talking to based in Silicon Valley and then kind of like done it that way. We would be a very different business. And I think, yeah, so I think like that constraint led us to make a decision that I'm so happy we did.
Yeah, you became very innovative. I mean, you drew a lot of innovation out of your challenges, and you became very resilient as well. It shows the resilience of your business and even the teams. I mean, all the Odetians, like you call them, were taken on board and actually they fully took ownership of the company and of its mission. And I think that's the best way to grow. And so we're almost reaching the end of this conversation, but I wanted to give an opportunity to people in the audience to ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand, and you will definitely, I will give you the floor to come and talk, or if you want to, maybe if you're a bit shy and you don't want to talk, you can share your question in the comment section and we'll read it for you. And I'm sure Catherine will love to hear a bit from you, who you are, what you've done. I see some members who are in the audience today, so feel free to come and talk. And me, in the meantime, I will have an extra question I would like to ask you, is what would you say to a woman entrepreneur who is based, probably not in the US, but you're more familiar with other contexts since you actually work with women in different parts of the world. So maybe in a less privileged environment, but you actually show that even if we don't have big investors and big VCs, we can be inventive and find ways to make it work. But what you would recommend to a woman who wants to build a business, but the same way to have an impact, and she's afraid because she's afraid of not having the profitability she needs for the business to be sustainable. So what would you recommend to her? How can she make the decisions and how can she make it work?
Yeah, I will. I think that's important because I think at some point, my prior self, I believed that too. I thought there was like this trade-off that you had to make. I was kind of thinking about it in a very kind of, you know, you could either do this or that. And that if you're focused on the social mission, you're going to have less revenue. And that's actually not true at all. I think especially if you're building something that there are a bunch of companies that are building that same thing, if you have a vision that is inspiring, if you have a mission that can rally people around you or that is memorable, you're actually going to earn more revenue and be more profitable. And so it was kind of like this like mindset shift that if you think about it, so who would you rather help? Someone who's just like trying to make themselves financially wealthy and they're sitting wherever they are, or someone who is like trying to empower their community and they have this idea for some sort of product and it's going to make like their beaches cleaner, or it's going to like, you know, they're part of their supply chain is going to be, you know, these amazing women who don't have literacy, but they have these skills. Like, who are you going to remember? And like, what email will you reply to? Because like in the businesses that like, or like at least what I've seen is like, you need people to reply to what you're doing. They have to care. And so, so if you have this amazing vision and mission, I think it will probably like double, triple, quadruple any revenue that you have. And like Odetta has like proven that. I mean, if we look at our competitors who are building just like the exact same service and maybe even a better service from a technology perspective for our clients, but our clients pick us. And they pick us because they believe in us, that we're presenting kind of like a view of the world that they want to be in reality. Like we're bringing something that they can be part of. And I think if you can do that, and it doesn't matter who you are, who you know, where you're sitting, what skills you have whatever's inside of you, and you have the internet and you have LinkedIn, and that's it. That's all you need, I think.
Yeah, okay, yeah, definitely. So you are showing we can be more profitable while prioritizing our vision and our mission. And Ridiana is saying something about that as too, that it's actually important to communicate it to your team and to tell them what is your mission about, for them to take ownership of it. And how do you ensure, very good question, how do you ensure that they actually do that in practice as well, in their work ethic and when they are dealing with customers on a daily basis?
Yeah, so probably the first thing that we do is we hire for that. So it's part of our hiring is our mission. And so we ask questions in the interview process around, you know, why do you care about our mission? What have you lived previously where this would be impactful? What's like your story of grit? What have you overcome? Where are you coming from? Have you demonstrated a commitment to our mission? Like, you don't have had to, but oftentimes what happens is then we're attracting people who want to be part of this, who want to help bring this to their village, their community, whatnot. And so then again, it really shouldn't be about the founder or the leadership team, like just having a vision and then kind of like trying to enforce that across a bunch of people. Like this group kind of like then steps into a larger purpose. And then you have to make decisions based off of that. Otherwise, it's just a marketing thing. So we make decisions for our business based off of our mission. And we're very clear to prioritize our Odettans over our clients, which I think if you didn't really care about your mission, you would prioritize your clients. But our clients like that we do that because it means that we're taking care of our people. And so there's like this kind of nurturing purity behind our intentions. And so, yeah, so I think like, as long as it's the people there are there for the vision, that's part of it, but then it has to be also part of like the business and the strategy, and that'll happen organically. It doesn't, a lot of the things that we've done that have been great from that perspective were like year 3 and 4. So you don't have to know that. I think you just, as long as you're kind of like thinking about these things, they will start to happen.
Okay, yeah, and yeah, you said something. It might not make sense for many entrepreneurs. You are prioritizing the Odettians over your customers, because the customers are actually the one bringing you cash, but you are prioritizing your team over your customers, and that's what makes you succeed. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's unusual.
Yeah,
but then when you think about it, why are we more successful than a lot of our competitors? Our quality is better. Our people are eager and curious, like they're happy to be there. And so by making those decisions, I think that we're kind of like saying like our product is kind of our people and we're going to prioritize them over our clients. And then our clients are saying, yeah, like your quality in leadership is better than the other ones, because the other ones are often these exploitative platforms that are trying to pull as much value from people as they can. And so it all like this stuff adds up. And at some point, like it's like people understand the intention behind it. And if that's not, I think, pure, and if it is kind of like self-focused or whatever, I think that it's hard to rally a lot of people around like a purpose.
Okay, yeah, what you've said in terms of funding, your mission, your values, it's completely the opposite of what we are actually hearing the most online nowadays. And it's actually very interesting because I think that you are probably, many people will actually resonate with what you say, because we have many entrepreneurs who tell us in our communities that they want to make money, they want to have a profitable business, but they don't want to get financed by VCs and to get millions. They want to do something that makes an impact at their own level, and something they can really own and drive by themselves, and they will be happy and satisfied with. So Catherine, that's very, very insightful. I see that there are no questions from the audience. If you want to say something, ladies, feel free to go ahead and step in, because we won't have Catherine for another time. So it's actually now or never. But I don't know, Catherine, if you want to say something, to add something to, because the conversation is actually recorded and we're going to share it with our communities. And we know they actually love this type of conversations. So they're probably going to watch it later on. But if there's something you want to add, you want to say, and to other women like you who are entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
to motivate them or inspire them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is inspiring or motivating, but one thing that I think I wish I had thought about more in the early days, like this kind of, a lot of my like journey personally, especially around understanding values, especially around like kind of like what kind of company I wanted to build. It wasn't like preformed. Like I didn't have all of these ideas before starting the company. Like maybe it sounds like that this, that I knew all of this stuff. Like it was all learned in the process of building the company. And I would say my greatest challenge, and I remember specifically, I went to some talk. I knew that I wanted to build a company, but it was just 10 years before building one. And someone said, like, you have to have a worldview. And I was like, I don't even know what my values are, or like, I wasn't like as connected to like what kind of business I wanted to build. Like I knew I wanted to like make the world better, but I didn't know why. And so I think like understanding the why, which could shift, is really important, because then you can start to remove a lot of the common whys, like, oh, like I want to be listened to, or I want to be heard, or like I want to be someone of value, like I want to matter. And you can kind of like write that down and say, okay, great, like this is like part of my motivation. But then you can kind of like remove some of those layers behind it, and you can say, okay, that's something that someone told me to think, but like underneath it all is like this like burning desire to do X, like to fix this bias. And like, for me, it like came back to like some like really early experiences in childhood that I felt like deeply, deeply connected to like fixing. And so if you can connect to that fire, that's like your inner purpose, you don't have to do it like before you start the company. But I think building a business that is then connected to that fire is like, then no one can take it away. Like it is, you then have a spark that like is going to fuel the entire thing. And these VCs, like these naysayers, like the people who may join your team and like bring kind of like negativity, like you are calm and cool in the face of this. And so, yeah, I didn't know, I had kind of like done some work to kind of figure out enough of it that when someone told me about the gig economy and the state of the world for women in work, that I was like, I am going to build that business. But I hadn't done all the connections yet. Like I was kind of like, why me? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not from the Middle East. I don't know anything about these women. Like, a lot of people come up to me and they were like, what are your, like, why did you think you could build that business? And I had a lot of insecurities at first about that, until I realized, and like kind of like really went on my own journey and was like, this is why, and this is how I'm going to build it so that it isn't kind of like my greatest fear. And I was very connected to all along, and probably prior to the company, like the companies and people that I admired and the ones that I didn't. And I wrote those down, kind of like, these are the things that if I had the honor, the privilege of one day building something that I really believed in, like, this is kind of like how I would do it. And so I think, like, I don't want to say that I didn't have the answers before starting the business, but I did go through like a darker period in my life where I was really forced to ask those questions. And so I think if you're in that period, that's a very good sign, even if it's painful, because like it'll help you connect to your why, and then you will be unstoppable. And you want to get to the point where you're going to be unstoppable, like that what someone says, like it won't impact you because you're connected to your larger purpose.
Wow. That's I mean, that talks to me. I'm sure it's going to talk to a lot of other people too. You need to dig deep inside of you to find your why, and then you become unstoppable because you are basically driven, and you know what you're doing, and you know you're doing something positive. So it's actually, your story is actually very, very interesting. And I mean, for me, it's a real pleasure to meet you, to know about you, to know about Odetta and your mission, and to hear that there are some women who are actually changing the narrative in this world and making the world a better place, in a different way that might be unusual, but is actually very impactful. And I think, okay, so I don't know if you don't put your name, but you say that it's very insightful, and we agree that we're knowing your values is actually a process, and you discover yourself and your company grows with you as an entrepreneur. So you don't have to know everything from the beginning. You just start with what you have, and you take it from there little by little. And that's what matters. What I will get as well from what you say is that what matters is to take the first action. You just started, you just posted something on social network, who wants to work, and then you look for customers, and you took it one day at a time, step by step, and that's how Odetta is actually growing. And you mentioned that failure is what leads you to innovation. I think that's another key takeaway I would take from our conversation, because we need to talk a bit more about failure. Failure is part of the process, and we shouldn't feel that everything ended because we failed. It's the contrary. You failed, and it means that you are very close to your next big thing, or to your next innovation. So that's something very, very important. And communicating your vision at the end of the story, okay, it's about business, it's about money, but if you communicate what are your values, what is your vision, what is your mission, and you communicate it not only to your customers but also to your team, you have the good recipe to have a successful and profitable business that is sometimes even more profitable than other business, unlike what we can believe, or what we see, or what we see on social network, on social media, or in the media. Your business can be very profitable without having to look for crazy money and looking for Silicon Valley people, but just by being true to yourself, and to your values. I think maybe if you want to share your LinkedIn profile, but you can look for Catherine Wolf on LinkedIn, you will find her. And thank you for sharing your email address too, because I know some of them might actually reach out to you to ask you a few questions. And like I said, the conversation will be recorded too, because I know some members couldn't make it. They texted me saying they can't make it, so they will watch the recording afterwards. And just now to thank you, because we've spent like an hour together. And it's about time for me to thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for your time, for your availability, for your transparency, just saying the things the way they are. I had many more other questions to ask, but what you've said is already so insightful. And I just leave the last word to you if you want to say something.
Well, thanks for having me and for kind of like building a space where these conversations can be had. Because it's important to talk about this, because I think there's like a prevailing, kind of sense that things have to be done. It's good to have a lot of different perspectives about how companies can be built. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Catherine. Please take care. Keep us updated, because we will continue to follow your story, and I'm really interested in knowing what's going to happen next for OData.
Yeah, and likewise, thank you for everyone here who is building businesses and making the world better. I'd love to hear what those are. And I put my email there as probably the best way to reach out to me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Catherine. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.